What happened to you that no one believes actually happened? Story 1. I was waiting to get the tube on the London Underground. One just pulled up, but we decided it was too busy and we'd wait for the next one. There was a woman who kept staring at me, intense eye contact. She got on the crowded tube and continued to stare. She turned to face the man next to her, whose back was turned. She then licked this guy's giant afro unbeknownst to him whilst maintaining eye contact with me. The doors closed and the tube went away. People think it's too random to be true. The memory is burnt into my brain. Story 2. This is going to sound a bit weird, and it's hard to explain, but basically it goes like this. One time as a kid I was standing by the edge of a cliff over my dad's garage, had been climbing it with a friend. It was pretty slippery at the edge and because of that I accidentally slipped and fell. It was probably 6-7 meters down to the ground. At the ground there was this singular plank that had been placed to rest between the tables. I literally fell down 5-6 meters, landed with my butt on the plank and bounced down on the ground feet first. It didn't hurt one bit. I don't know how I got so lucky. Story 3. I fully admit how stupid this was, but I was swimming by myself in the Gulf in fairly clear water, about 10-15 feet deep. My parents and sister were on the beach watching me. With how clear and calm the water was, I'd occasionally go under, blow out all my air, and just sit on the sandy bottom. I can open my eyes in short intervals in salt water, so I'd look around a bit once I settled on the bottom. During one of these drops to the bottom, I bumped into something and a giant, dark blob took up nearly my entire field of vision when I opened my eyes. At first, I thought it was an alligator, and I was a goner, but it turned out to be an equally startled manatee. I had no idea they could swim that fast. Most people don't believe me, but it was one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had. Edit. What was stupid is that I was about 200-300 yids from shore, and there was no one within 100 yds of me in the water. I'm a strong swimmer, but it's never a good idea to be isolated to that degree while swimming in the ocean even on a calm day. Story 4. We have a cat that wouldn't pee in the toilet, but she would go wash her paws after using the litter box in the toilet. It took a long time to see weird stuff at the bottom of the toilet, almost looked like ashes after it had been sitting in the water for a while, before we caught the cat daintily dipping her paws in the water to get the cat litter off. We didn't even know what to think. What a prissy cat, lol. Story 5. I had a job interview in a town I'd never been in before. Got lost and decided to park the car and walked up to a random stranger, some old man I'd never seen before. Asked him where I can find name of business. He politely tells me where to find it, and then says, "You're welcome, my first name and last name." I never told him my first and last name, just asked for directions. I was dumbfounded, and he just chuckles and walks off into some store. I think back to it every so often. I have an uncommon name, there's no way you can even guess it. Story 6. One time I was walking along the outside hallway of a hotel that faced the beach and sunset. A group was out sitting in chairs, kind of blocking the path, drinking beers and being friendly. They scooched to the side as I walked past and told me they heard you can see a green flash right at sunset some nights. I looked out and immediately saw the sun set below the horizon with a quick, bright green flash. No one else saw it. They were too busy chatting and moving their chairs out of the way. No one believed me either. Story 7. When I was a kid, my family would watch the lottery drawing after the nightly news. It was the Texas lottery then. I remember sitting there, and for some reason, I started just saying numbers, trying to guess what the balls were going to be before they called them out. I guessed all the numbers correctly before they were called out. My family was freaked out that I did that, but laughed about it, joking that I'm picking numbers for their tickets from now on. I recalled the story at a family get-together years later and none of them remember that moment. I remember it. Story 8. My dad picked me up and we went about 20 miles out to the countryside. He was visiting a friend who had a river run through his property. Dad wanted to talk to the guy about fishing. The guy also had a little shop selling knickknacks and ornaments. My dad is one of the stingiest people alive. He never buys anything. I begged him to let me choose a gift. He allowed me just one. I chose a small, bluish Viking statue. It was half a set, but I definitely wasn't allowed to buy the woman Viking. Just one. When I got home, my mum said she had gone for a drive that day with her partner, stopped at a tiny gift shop and bought a woman Viking statue, the other half of the set. Story 9. I charged at a grizzly bear. I let my dog outside one night while my husband was at work. The house we used to rent didn't have lights in the backyard, so I would shine a flashlight through the living room windows into the yard when he went out. I was standing there watching my dog and he suddenly stopped and was staring at something. I whipped the flashlight in the direction he was looking, and less than 10 feet from him was a grizzly bear staring down at my dog, with only a flimsy chicken wire fence between them. My mind quickly flashed to our safe upstairs, and I knew I didn't have enough time to get up there. So I ran outside towards the bear like a bridge troll, stomping, waving my arms to look big, blinding the bear with the flashlight, and yelled in the deepest and loudest voice I could muster, "Go away, bear. Leave him alone. Get out of here." The bear was shook and just darted off into the darkness. I ran down to my dog and swooped his ass up and threw him inside, and locked the door. In the same month, someone else in town had their dog killed by a bear when they let them outside at night. I've stopped telling people this story because no one believes I would actually charge at a bear or they think I'm insane, but I fucking love my dog. Edit. This was indeed a brown bear and not a black bear. I used to live on Kodiak Island, and it only has Kodiak brown bears, no black bears. I used grizzly because I was trying to not to point out where I used to live, but with the naysayers figured I'd share the location. Story 10. 20 years ago, in my mid-20s, a friend asked me to spend Thanksgiving with her in Laughlin, Nevada because she had no one else to hang out with. Single guy with no other plans, I made the long drive there. She's just a friend, nothing romantic. Late one night, I'm the total amateur at the craps table and start rolling dice with a really cute girl. Way out of my league. Lots of drinks. Winning big, just a great time. She really knew what she was doing. Placing bets I've never even heard of. One thing leads to another, and I end up back at her room. The next morning, we were having breakfast, and she shows me her pics in Playboy magazine. We said our goodbyes, and I've never seen her again. Only one night stand I've ever had in my life. Yep, just your average, ordinary-looking guy that slept with a playmate. I only told a few people, but they didn't believe me, so I decided to mostly keep it to myself. I don't blame anyone for not believing it because it sounds like the most made-up ego-boosting guy story ever. But I did end up finding the magazine with her pics. And yes, for a mid-20s guy, it did boost my ego. Story 11. In the summer of 1987, I was in a bar in a little village in New York outside the gates of West Point. It was the middle of the week, and it was just me and the bartender. Willie Nelson walked in, sat down at a bar stool and drank with us for a couple of hours. He was at the very height of his popularity. I had just read his autobiography a few weeks before and he was my favorite singer. I'm chatty, but I was tongue-tied that day. No one believed me afterwards. I suspect no one believes me today. Story 12. I nearly drowned on the 4th of July when I was 16. Parents, aunts and uncles were around the pool and didn't see anything and insist it didn't happen because they would have seen it. I agreed to swim with my younger cousins. They were ecstatic that a big kid agreed to swim with them. I jump in and they immediately all dogpile on top of me. They're pushing me down in their excitement and I'm trying to get to the surface. I remember blacking out for a second and then thinking, I'm not dying in a fucking swimming pool. I did the only thing I could think of at the time. I went against my instincts and dove deeper into the deep end and eventually got out from underneath my cousins and pulled myself out of the pool. Story 13. When I was 15 years old, I was doing some babysitting for my parents' friends for pocket money. I was babysitting this little girl one night. We were watching some kids' movie in the living room. This little girl was full of energy, so she was jumping on the couch during the movie. I thought it would be better to let her spend her energy now so bedtime would be easier. So I sat next to her during the movie just in case she stumbled or fell. Everything was going fine until the moment I decided to get up to go to the bathroom. It kinda double jumped her trampoline style when I shifted my weight, so she got much more air this time. The thing is, this couch was right next to a staircase going into the basement. The railing was just behind us, leading to 15-20 feet drop right to the bottom of the basement stairs. She got thrown right over the railing head first into the drop. I threw myself at her and caught her ankle at the last second. I pulled her back onto the couch and sat her down, asking her if she was okay. She just smiled at me and continued to watch the movie, seemingly unfazed by the fact that she almost died. In all honesty, she probably didn't realize the danger she was in that moment. Sometimes I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't caught her. Story 14. I was meeting some friends for dinner after work one night. We agreed to meet at a specific time, and as I was leaving work, made note of the time. I knew I would be arriving late because of my regular commute time, which was around half an hour. I take my usual route to their place, which is a straight shot. 20 minutes go by. I should almost be there when I noticed the road was looking a little unfamiliar. I tried reading street signs and decided to take the next turn I came across. I follow the road an extra 10 minutes and end up on a main road, the same road that leads from my work to my friend's place that I thought I was on. From where I was, my commute time was around 20 minutes. I did not make any turns while I was driving. Have no idea how I ended up there. My friends were convinced I probably just drove on autopilot or fell asleep at the wheel. Story 15. Went camping last year. Woke up to something pressing in on the tent down by my feet. Watched as the pressing in shook the whole side of the tent and moved up from my feet to my hip. That's when I realized that whatever was pushing in on me was a human hand. Could clearly see the fingers outlined. Immediately took stock of everyone in my tent, all present and accounted for. Jumped up out of my cot. I was the only one who saw it. Everyone else told me to go back to bed. It was just a deer or something. Spent a good hour trying to convince myself I hadn't seen a hand. Story 16. One time when I was maybe 10, I woke up in the morning before everyone else in my family and went out into the living room. From the living room I could see my younger brother, my only sibling, sitting at the dining room table with his back to me, and it looked like he was drawing or coloring on a piece of paper. I asked him something to effect of, "Good morning. What are you doing?" And he just kept drawing with his back to me. For a split second I walked past a part of wall more like a column that was in between the dining room area and kitchen. In the short moment that I passed the column and looked at him again from the other side, he was gone. The paper and crayons were still there. I paused for a moment, said his name out loud questioningly, then got spooked and ran to my parents' bedroom. They were both completely asleep and my brother was fast asleep next to them. He'd had a nightmare and slept with them that night, which would happen every so often. The way the house was set up, it wouldn't really have been feasible for him to slip past me and then quickly pretend to be asleep in my parents' room. My parents have never really believed me or thought it was part of a dream, and my brother swears to this day he wasn't in the dining room that morning. Story 17. There was a toy pig old couple gave to me and my roommates. Sometimes we would throw it at each other. One day it disappeared. I knew we'd thrown it in the corner of my bedroom, but it was gone. A few days later, we found it on the top shelf in the kitchen. I'm the only one who can reach that high. Over the next month or two, that toy pig would keep disappearing and reappearing in random places. We all blamed it on each other until one day it disappeared in the front room again. Me and my friends all went to the store. When we came back, it was on the sidewalk in front of our house. After I left, one of my roommates threw it away because he thought it was haunted. Story 18. I don't expect anyone to believe me, as I didn't even believe it myself as it was taking place. I was at a Target about 4 years ago. This Target has 3 parking lot floors and 3 floors inside the Target: the main ground floor, the middle floor, and the roof floor. I had parked my car on the second floor right next to a blue Subaru Forester. I went inside and did a little shopping for a couple things we needed at home. I finished paying and I take the elevator to the second floor. I get to the spot where I parked and my car isn't there. Instead, there's a white Mini Cooper though. The blue Subaru Forester I had parked next to is still there, right next to parking space I clearly remember parking in. I start thinking to myself for a few seconds and I decide to take the stairs to the third floor because maybe I did park on the third floor, but perhaps I misread the sign. I look around and I don't see my car anywhere. I go back to the stairs and I walk down with my 2 bags back to the second floor because I could have sworn I parked right there. At this point, I don't know if I'm either losing my mind or if my car had gotten stolen. I look around again to where the blue Forester was, and there it was, my red Sentra parked right where I left it. I honestly have no answers as to what could have happened, but to this day I make sure I park on the ground level as close to other cars as possible to prevent my car from vanishing or me entering different dimensions. None of my relatives believe me and I'm too afraid to tell my friends about this because they'll think I'm really starting to go cuckoo. That's all for now. Thanks for listening to Digital Apathy.